People are in prison for all different kinds of reasons, all across the globe. But here, it seems as though the people who are imprisoned are facing the same treatment at the same facilities with seemingly no regard over the actual level of crime in which was committed. So it's obvious that something is not quite right here. The prison system needs to be reformed in America in order to create a better likelihood of rehabilitation for previous inmates. I spent hours collecting information and researching this topic so that you and I both feel like we have a really good understanding about this topic, the current state of prisons, and how a prison reform in America would actually benefit the country. To begin, I will be explaining the problems of the prisons, including the increased number of those incarcerated per capita. Following this, I will provide you all with information on the laws and policies that actually allow for the poor rehabilitation standards in the country. And lastly, I will focus on the ways in which the American government can and should improve the conditions of both state and federal prisons. So let's start with the root of the problem, which would be the prisons themselves. Every prison is considered to be a coercive organization, which means that they maintain their control through force, through physical force. So in the 3 different levels that I will be talking about right now, maximum security prisons obviously have the highest level of security, as the inmates are classified as extremely dangerous still. They require the most security because they continue to pose a threat to themselves, their inmates, prison guards, as well as their communities. As a result of this, the inmates typically spend around 23 hours per day in their cells. Medium security prisons still maintain a high level of security, but the main difference is that inmates are actually allowed out of their cells for longer periods of time throughout the day. And in the lowest level, minimum security, it obviously has the least level of security there, and a lot of the inmates are allowed to go to work camps in which they're still supervised by prison guards. But it gives them the ability to earn a little bit of extra money potentially for when they do get out, though it is not very much. The number of incarcerated people per capita is one of the few things that the United States actually leads the world in. Peter Wagner, he's an attorney and the executive director of the Prison Policy Initiative. As reported by him, he says that the American criminal justice system holds almost 2.3 million people in 1,833 state prisons, 110 federal prisons, 1,772 juvenile correction facilities, 3,134 local jails, 218 immigration detention facilities, and 80 Indian country jails, as well as in military prisons, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and prisons in U.S. territories. So since we have a basic understanding of prison organization, let's discuss the laws that allow for such poor rehabilitation conditions in the first place. So the rate of people held in American prisons is a direct result of the laws and policies that are passed by state and federal legislatures, governors, and the president himself. So starting 30 to 40 years ago, laws began being passed that were intended to ensure that inmates would actually have to stay in prison for a longer period of time in relation to the crime in which they committed. So that ratio increased significantly during these periods. This also led to policymakers who wanted to increase the use and the severity of prison sentences, and other attributes have contributed to this over time as well, especially in the last 30 to 40 years, and that one of the biggest things was actually the raising crime rates of the 1970s and 80s, which is commonly referred to the war on drugs. It turned into that, and changes in prevailing attitudes towards crime and criminals, which actually led to a harsher treatment of criminals afterwards because they were viewed in such a nasty light. There are 3 distinct phases of prison change in which we've already gone through. So the first one started in 1975, and it aimed towards making prison sentences fairer and more uniform across the country. And it also took into account some of the racial problems that were embedded into the system already. The second phase lasted from the mid-'80s until about 1996 and was focused on making sentences for drug and violent crimes harsher and their imprisonment more certain. And then in the third and final phase, which was from 96 until right now, where we're at today in 2020, it's been a pretty calm period in which not much has changed, but according to annual reports issued by the National Conference of State Legislatures, several hundred laws have been enacted since 2000 that in various ways make sentencing actually less rigid and less severe. So that is a positive thing that we're making a gradual improvement there. Now I want to share with you in the ways in which that the American government can actually improve using Norway's Halden prison as a blueprint. So the solution to the prison problem in America is to actually look to another country's successful model. So in an article written by the New York Times author Jessica Banco, she writes that the treatment of inmates at Halden is wholly focused on helping to prepare them for a life after they get out. Not only is there no death penalty in Norway, there are no life sentences. The maximum sentence for most crimes is 21 years, which was true even for one of the deadliest killers in the world, Anders Breivik, who lived in Norway. In the Americas, for comparison, a recent report shows that the strategies used by our justice system to achieve rehabilitation and increase public safety has been ineffective, with more than 80% of the inmates who leave returning to prison within a year. So in this speech, I've discussed the structure of the prison systems themselves. Following that, we learned about the implementation of laws and policies in the United States that allow for degrading treatment of actual inmates. And finally, you're provided with an example of how the Americas can improve using Norway as a model. In conclusion, I hope you better understand the ways in which prison reform is important and how it will positively impact the Americas. There's an endless amount of information out there about prison reform, about how this could be beneficial for America. So I implore you to research more if you're interested in this topic, as it makes you more aware of the country in which you reside and how the government is not protecting its citizens in the manner it should be. Thank you.